The signal had been calling for 42 days. Deep in the cold darkness of space, far beyond the safe shipping lanes and protected colonies of the galactic, Concord, a small beacon floated among the stars. It sent out its message again and again, never stopping, never giving up. The message was simple. It was a cry for help in SOS. But no one was coming. The beacon belonged to a ship called the Grace. It was a large vessel built by the people to carry families and children and elders across the vast distances between stars. 3,000 had been aboard when the ship entered the Shroud Nebula. 3,000 souls looking for a new home after war had destroyed their old one. Now, after 42 days of silence, the galactic Concord had declared them dead. Ambassador N stood in the center of the great assembly hall and tried not to cry. Her people did not cry the way humans did. Instead, one felt deep sadness. The soft light that glowed beneath their pale skin grew dim. Right now was barely glowing at all. She looked like a candle about to go out. "Please," she said to the assembled representatives. Her voice was soft and musical the way all voices were. "Please, you must send someone. My people are still out there. I know they are." The assembly hall was the largest room in the entire Concord station. It was shaped like a bowl with hundreds of seats rising up in circles around a central platform. Each seat held a representative from one of the many species that had joined together to form the galactic Concord. There were beings of every shape and size. Some were tall and thin, some were short and round, some did not have solid bodies at all. The representative was the first to respond. There were species made entirely of living crystal. They were beautiful to look at, with bodies that caught the light and sent rainbows dancing across the walls. But they were also very logical. They did not make decisions based on feelings. Ambassador N said, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. "We understand your pain, truly we do, but the mathematics are clear. No ship has ever entered the Shroud Nebula and returned. The gravitational forces alone would tear any vessel apart. The radiation would kill any living creature within hours. And even if somehow a ship survived those dangers, the sensor interference makes navigation impossible. Any rescue mission would simply add more deaths to this tragedy." "The speak truth," said the ambassador. There were beings with hard shells and many legs and large eyes that saw in every direction at once. They were known throughout the galaxy as excellent engineers and builders. "We have studied the Shroud extensively. Our calculations show a 0% chance of survival for any vessel that enters. 0%. Ambassador, we are sorry for your loss, but we cannot send our people to die for nothing." Felt her glow dim even further. She had heard these arguments before. She had heard them every day for the past 42 days, and every day she had come back to this hall to try again. "But the beacon is still transmitting," she said. "If everyone aboard was dead, the beacon would have stopped. It is powered by life energy. As long as even one heart beats aboard that ship, the beacon will continue to call. Please, someone must be alive." A murmur ran through the assembly. The representatives looked at each other with expressions of pity and discomfort. They felt sorry for the ambassador, but they had already made their decision. The Shroud was death. Everyone knew this. It was simply a fact of the universe, like gravity or the speed of light. The representative drifted Forward, there were beings of living gas, held together by energy fields that gave them vague shifting shapes. They were considered among the species in the conquered, partly because they lived for thousands of years and had seen many things come and go. Ambassador in the said, its voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. We have lost people to the shroud as well. Many species have. Long ago, before the conquered was formed, we sent 7 ships into that darkness to rescue a scientific expedition. None returned. We learned then what we must teach you now. The shroud does not give back what it takes. It is not cruel. It is not kind. It simply is, and what it is death. Closed her eyes. She had no more arguments. She had used them all. Logic, emotion, promises, pleas, nothing worked. The conquered had decided, and the conquered did not change its mind. She was about to turn and leave when a voice spoke from the back of the hall. We'll go. The voice was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was calm and steady, like someone commenting on the weather. But the effect on the assembly was immediate. Every head turned, every eye focused on the speaker. A ripple of unease passed through the great hall. The human delegation sat in the highest row of seats, far from the center of power. Humans were new to the conquered. They had only been members for 18 standard cycles, which was barely any time at all in galactic terms. Most species still did not know quite what to make of them. The speaker was a woman. She stood up slowly, and even that simple movement seemed to carry a weight that made several nearby representatives lean away. She was not tall by human standards, but she was built like a weapon. Her body was thick with muscle. Her skin was brown and covered with scars. One of her eyes had been replaced with a mechanical implant that glowed faintly red in the dim light of the hall. Her name was Captain, and she commanded the Terran Recovery Corps. I'm sorry, said the ambassador, its antennae twitching nervously. Did the human representative just volunteer to enter the shroud? I did, said she, began walking down toward the central platform, her boots making heavy sounds on the metal floor. Other representatives moved out of her way without being asked. The adamantine is docked at Station 7. We can be ready to leave within 6 hours. The representative made a sound like breaking glass. It was the equivalent of a laugh, though there was no humor in it. Captain, with respect, you do not understand. Your species is new to space travel. You have not yet learned what is and is not possible. The shroud is not merely dangerous, it is absolutely lethal. Your ship would be destroyed before you traveled a single light year into its depths. Reached the central platform and stood next to Ambassador N. The woman looked at her with confusion and desperate hope mixed together. Did not look at her. She kept her one human eye fixed on the let me tell you something about my species. Said, we come from a planet called Earth. I'm sure you've heard of it. Your scientists have a name for worlds like ours. You call them Deathworlds. Assembly shifted uncomfortably. Yes, they had heard of Earth. They had studied it when humans first made contact with the galactic community. What they had found had disturbed them deeply. On Earth, continued, the temperature swings from hot enough to boil water to cold enough to freeze blood. The atmosphere is filled with a gas called oxygen, which is basically slow fire. It rusts metal and burns organic matter. We breathe it to live. The gravity is nearly twice what most of your species can tolerate. The planet is covered with water, which is filled with Creatures that want to eat you. The land is covered with creatures that want to eat you, even the smallest life forms, invisible to the eye, want to eat you. They live inside our bodies right now. Billions of them, and we have learned to use them instead of dying from them. She paused and looked around the hall. Evolved on this world, she said, we did. Not just survive it, we conquered it. We climbed to the top of a food chain that included animals with claws and teeth, and venom and size advantages we could never match. We did it with these. She held up her hands, showing fingers that could grip and manipulate and build, and with this she tapped her head. We are persistence predators. We are endurance hunters. When we chase prey, we do not stop. We follow it until it collapses from exhaustion, until its heart gives out. We can run for days without rest. We can survive wounds that would kill any other creature. We can function in heat and cold that would shut down most biological systems. The hall was silent now. Every representative was staring at the human. Woman, your shroud said, is radiation and gravity and cold and darkness. We have faced all of these things. We split the atom and lived through the fallout. We traveled to the bottom of our oceans, where the pressure would crush your ships like paper. We built cities in deserts where nothing should grow. We planted flags on frozen wastelands where the air itself wants to kill you. She turned to look at the representative. You said the shroud is death. Maybe it is, but my people have been staring death in the face since we first climbed down from the trees. We are not afraid of it. We just learned to work around it. Ambassador N reached out and touched his arm. Her hand was trembling. You would truly do this? You would risk your lives for my people? We are strangers to you. We have nothing to offer. Finally looked at her. The captain's face was hard and weathered, but her voice was almost gentle. Ma'am, I've got 47 crew members on my ship. Every single one of them volunteered for the recovery corps because they wanted to help people who couldn't help themselves. It doesn't matter that your people are strangers. It doesn't matter that you have nothing to offer. What matters is that someone out there sent a signal asking for help. She turned back to face the assembly. And when humans hear a cry for help, we answer. The conquered representatives looked at each other. They did not know what to say. In all their centuries of existence, no species had ever volunteered to enter the shroud. Very idea was considered madness. The ambassador spoke carefully. Captain, even if we were to approve this mission, which we have not yet decided, you must understand that the conquered cannot provide any support. We cannot send ships to assist you. We cannot send medical vessels to wait at the edge of the nebula. If you enter the shroud, you will be completely alone. We're used to that, said. Humans have always been alone. We had to figure everything out by ourselves. Fire, tools, language, medicine, space travel. No one helped us. No one taught us. We learned because we had to, or we died. And many of you did die. The pointed out. Yes, agreed. Many of us did, but not all of us. And the ones who survived got stronger, got smarter, got better. She smiled, and several representatives flinched. Human teeth were designed for tearing meat. Their smiles looked like threats. Were the descendants of every human who ever looked at something impossible and said, I can do that. Every person who climbed a mountain because it was there. Every explorer who sailed into unknown waters. Every scientist who asked questions that Everyone said couldn't be answered. She spread her arms wide. So yes, send us into your shroud, send us into your death trap, send us into the darkness that has swallowed every other ship. Because I promise you this, we will either come back with survivors or we will die trying, and either way at least someone tried. The assembly fell into a deep silence for a long moment. No one spoke, then slowly the representative drifted forward. Concord will not stop you, it said. We cannot support you, but we will not stop you if you wish to throw your lives away on an impossible mission. That is your choice to make. It's not impossible, said, it's just hard. There's a difference. She turned to Ambassador, and the woman was glowing again. Just a little hope did that to her people. Even a small amount of hope was enough to bring back their light. Ambassador, I'm going to need everything you have on this Grace. Deck plans, crew manifests, cargo lists, everything. I'm also going to need the exact coordinates of that beacon. You will have it all within the hour. In said, Captain, I do not know how to thank you. My people will remember this forever. Even if you fail, we will remember that you tried. Nodded, we won't fail. I've got the best crew in the fleet. We've pulled people out of situations that should have been impossible before. This is just another job. She began walking back up toward the exit, but stopped halfway and turned around one more time. One more thing, she said to the assembly. When we come back with those survivors, I expect the Concord to provide full medical support and refugee assistance. Those people have been through enough. They deserve to be taken care of. You speak as if success is certain. The said, it is certain, replied, because I will accept no other outcome. She continued walking, and this time she did not stop. The assembly watched her go. When the doors closed behind her, 100 conversations erupted at once. Representatives argued and debated and wondered what they had just witnessed. The ambassador turned to its neighbor, a small furry creature from a species known for their wisdom. What do you think? They asked. Will they succeed? The furry creature thought for a moment, its tiny eyes blinking slowly. I do not know, it said at last, but I will tell you this. In all my years, I have never seen a species quite like the humans. They do not think like we do. They do not calculate odds the way we do. When we see an impossible task, we turn away. When they see an impossible task, they get excited. It is almost like they enjoy challenging death itself. That sounds like madness. Perhaps it is. Or perhaps it is something else. Perhaps it is what evolution looks like when a species grows up on a world that is constantly trying to kill it. They learned that survival requires doing impossible things. They learned that giving up means dying, so they do not give up. They cannot. It is not in their nature. They made another wind chime sound. Do you think they will come back? The furry creature looked toward the door where had disappeared. I think it said slowly that if anyone in this galaxy can return from the shroud, it is the humans, and I think that when they do, nothing in the Concord will ever be the same. Far away on docking Platform 7, Captain walked up the ramp to her ship. The adamantine was not beautiful. It was not sleek or elegant like the vessels of older species. It was blocky and angular and covered with armor plating and weapon mounts. It looked exactly like what it was, a warship built by a species that had never known peace. Her first officer Commander James Park was waiting for her at the top of the ramp. "I heard your speech," he said, "very inspiring." "Did it work?" "The crew is all ready. Prepping for departure is running. Diagnostics on the engines is stocking. The medical bay, Sergeant Major Obi is checking the weapons." Allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Because we've got a long way to go and a lot of people to save. The shroud is going to be rough," Park said, "even for us. I know some of us might not come back." "I know that too," Park nodded. He had served with for 8 years. He had followed her into combat zones and disaster areas and places that made the shroud look like a vacation spot. He trusted her completely. "Well then," he said, "let's go do something impossible." Walked onto her ship and the ramp closed behind her. Within 6 hours the adamantine would leave the safety of the conquered station and head toward the darkness, toward the death trap that had swallowed every ship before it. 47 humans against the most dangerous place in the known galaxy. The odds were not in their favor, but then again the odds had never been in humanity's favor, and that had never stopped them before. The shroud was waiting and they were coming. The adamantine crossed the boundary of the Shroud Nebula at exactly 1,400 hours ship time. From the outside, the nebula looked almost beautiful. It was a vast cloud of purple and red gas lit from within by dying stars and strange energy fields. The colors swirled and danced like paint mixing in water. If you did not know what it was, you might think it was a work of art. Captain knew better. She stood on the bridge of her ship, hands clasped behind her back, and watched the wall of color grow larger on the main. Every sensor on the ship was already screaming warnings. Radiation levels were climbing. Gravitational readings were jumping wildly from one number to another. The computer was struggling to make sense of the chaos. "All hands, this is the captain," she said into the shipwide communication system. "We are about to enter the shroud. From this point forward, I need everyone at their best. Stay focused, stay sharp, and remember why we're here. There are 3,000 people counting on us. Let's bring them home." She closed the channel and turned to her bridge crew. Commander James Park sat at the navigation station, his eyes fixed on a display that showed nothing but static and confused readings. Lieutenant Sarah was at the weapons console, ready for threats that might come from any direction, and Tommy handled communications, though there would be no one to communicate with once they entered the nebula. "Take us in," Commander said. "I." Captain Park replied. His hands moved across the controls, crossing the threshold in 543. 2-1. The ship shuddered as it entered the nebula. The went dark for a moment, then came back, showing a world of swirling darkness and strange light. Colors flashed past the windows, things that might have been asteroids or might have been something else drifted in the murky distance, and then the real trouble began. Alarms started going off all at once. The ship lurched to the left as a gravitational wave hit it from the side. Grabbed his console to keep from falling out of his chair. Weapon systems flickered and went dead for a second before coming back online. "Gravity well bearing 270, Park shouted. Adjusting course, the ship turned hard, engine straining against forces that wanted to pull it apart. Another alarm joined the chorus, then another. Radiation counter climbed higher and higher. Hull integrity at 92%. the computer announced in its calm, mechanical voice. Radiation levels exceeding recommended. Limits recommend immediate withdrawal. Ignore that, said. How are we doing? Down there, Chief Engineer David's voice came back over the intercom, rough and annoyed. Oh, we're having a wonderful time, Captain. The starboard engine is trying to tear itself apart. The power conduits are overheating, and I'm pretty sure something in Section 4 just caught fire, but don't worry, we've got it handled. That's what I like to hear. The ship rocked again as another gravitational wave passed through, grabbed the railing in front of her and held on. She had been through earthquakes and hurricanes and combat situations where the ground itself seemed to be trying to kill her. This was worse than all of them, but not by much. Down in the engine room, and his team worked in conditions that would have killed any other species in the galaxy. The temperature had climbed to 45 degrees C for human. This was uncomfortable but survivable for Yor. It would have been lethal within minutes. Had stripped off his uniform jacket and was working in a sweat-soaked undershirt, his hands moving over controls and conduits with the speed of long practice. Martinez, get me a bypass on the cooling system, he shouted over the noise of straining engines. We need to redirect power to the forward shields. On a chief, a young woman shouted back. She crawled into a maintenance shaft that was barely big enough to fit a human body. The metal walls were hot enough to burn, but she ignored the pain. Human skin could heal from minor burns. The ship could not heal if they lost engine power. Another engineer named Williams was dealing with the fire. In Section 4, he had grabbed an extinguisher and rushed into the smoke-filled corridor without waiting for orders. The air was toxic with burning chemicals, but Williams just held his breath and kept working. Humans could hold their breath for several minutes if they had to. It was a survival trait left over from when their ancestors had to dive into water to catch fish or escape predators. The fire was out in under 3 minutes. Williams emerged from the corridor with singed hair and red eyes, coughing smoke out of his lungs. Section 4 is clear, he reported. Good work, said. Now get over here and help me with this conduit. The insulation is melting. Back on the bridge, watch the chaos unfold with calm eyes. She had seen worse. Every human on the ship had seen worse. That was the strange truth about humanity. They had evolved on a planet so hostile that nothing in space really surprised them. Navigation, can you get us a clear path? She asked. Park was sweating, his fingers flying over the controls. Most species used computers to calculate navigation through difficult regions of space. The calculations were too complex for organic minds to handle. But humans had evolved a different way of thinking. Their brains were pattern recognition machines built by millions of years of hunting and being hunted. They could see paths where others saw only chaos. I'm working on it, Park said. The gravitational fields are shifting constantly, but there's a pattern. There's always a pattern. I just need to find it. He stared at the swirling display, letting his mind go blank. This was a technique humans had discovered long ago. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem was to stop trying to solve it, to let the subconscious mind take over. The deeper parts of the brain could process information faster than the conscious mind. They just needed a chance to work. After 30 seconds that felt like hours, Park's eyes suddenly focused. Got it. He said there's a corridor. The gravity waves are flowing in a current. Like a river, if we ride the current. Instead of fighting it, we can get through. Do it ordered. Park adjusted their course. The ship stopped. Shuddering, the ride was still rough. But it was no longer trying to tear them apart. They were moving with the flow of the nebula instead of against it. Nice work, Commander said. Thank my brain, Park replied with a tired smile. A million years of running from lions finally paid off. They traveled for hours through the swirling darkness. The radiation continued to batter the ship's shields. The gravity continued to pull and push at them, but the crew adapted. As humans always adapted, they found rhythms in the chaos. They found solutions to problems that should have been unsolvable. Doctor worked in the medical bay, preparing treatments for radiation exposure that the ship's computer said were impossible. She had studied medicine on Earth, where doctors regularly dealt with conditions that the rest of the galaxy considered certain. Death, radiation sickness was bad, but humans had survived nuclear disasters before. They knew things about treating radiation that other species had never needed to learn. The key is to support the body's natural healing, she explained to her assistant, a young medic named Foster. Human cells can repair radiation damage if we give them the right tools. It's slow and it's painful, but it works. The medical database says there's no treatment for this level of exposure, Foster said, looking at the numbers on his screen. The database wasn't written by humans. Replied, we heal differently. Our bodies are designed to take damage and keep going. It's how we survived on a planet where everything wanted to kill us. She prepared a series of injections that combined advanced medicine with techniques humanity had developed over centuries of dealing with their own deadly world. It wasn't pretty, but it would work. In the ship's small mess hall, a group of off-duty crew members sat together and ate their rations. They should have been terrified. They were deep inside a region of space that had killed every expedition before them. The ship was taking constant damage. Any moment could be their last. Instead, they were playing cards. I'll raise you 20 credits, said Corporal Diana, one of the Marines. She was a small woman with dark hair and quick eyes. Her hands were covered in calluses from years of handling weapons. You're bluffing, said Private First Class Jackson, sitting across from her. I can see it in your eyes. Then call me, said with a smile. This was another thing about humans that confused other species. They could sit calmly in the face of death. They could laugh and joke and play games while the universe tried to destroy them. It wasn't that they didn't understand the danger. They understood it perfectly. They simply chose not to let it control them. Fear was useful. Fear kept you alert, but too much fear could paralyze you, and paralysis meant death. Somewhere in their evolution, humans had learned to manage their fear, to put it in a box and only take it out when they needed it. Right now they didn't need it. Right now they needed to stay calm and trust there to do their jobs. The card game continued as the ship flew deeper into the shroud. On day 2 they found the first piece of debris. Lieutenant spotted it on her sensors. Chunk of metal floating in the darkness. Ordered it brought aboard for analysis. When the engineers examined it, they found writing on the surface. It's from this Grace confirmed, part of an outer whole section. Any idea what caused the Damage, asked, pointed to a series of marks on the metal. These aren't from the nebula, these are weapon burns. Someone shot at this ship. The bridge went quiet. Everyone had assumed this. Grace had been destroyed by the natural hazards of the shroud, radiation, gravity, the thousand other ways this place could kill you, but weapons fire meant something else entirely. Pirates, Park said quietly. In the shroud, asked, that's insane. No pirate would operate in a place like this unless they knew the shroud well enough to navigate it, said, unless they used it as cover, a perfect hiding place. No one would ever come looking for them here. She stared at the burned metal for a long moment. Her jaw tightened. Her single human eye grew cold. If there are pirates in here, she said, then they might still be alive. Pirates don't destroy valuable cargo, they capture it. You think they took the refugees? Park asked. I think it's possible, and if it's possible, then we need to find them. She turned to the crew. New orders. We're not just looking for a crashed ship anymore. We're looking for a pirate base, and when we find it, we're going to take back those people. The crew's attitude shifted. Before, they had been on a rescue mission, dangerous but straightforward. Now they were hunting, and humans were very, very good at hunting. It was in their blood. Their ancestors had been pursued predators, chasing prey across vast distances until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Humans could track and follow and hunt for days without rest. They could read signs that other species would miss, a broken branch, a footprint, a trace of heat. Now those instincts turned toward a new kind of prey. Start scanning for any artificial structures, ordered. Anything that doesn't belong in a nebula. I want the engines ready for combat maneuvers. Sergeant Major Obi prepped the Marines for a possible boarding action. Sergeant Major Obi's voice came back from the ship's armory. Understood, Captain. The boys and girls are ready. Just point us at the target. They continued deeper into the shroud, following the trail of debris. More pieces appeared, hull fragments, personal items, a child's toy floating frozen in the void. Found that last piece on her shift. She held it in her hands for a long moment, looking at the small stuffed animal. It had probably belonged to a child who was now either dead or in the hands of slavers. She put the toy in her pocket and went back to her station. Her face was calm, but her eyes had changed. There was something cold in them now, something that most species would have recognized as dangerous. Humans were not a violent species by nature. They could be kind and gentle and loving. They built art and music and beautiful things. They formed deep bonds with each other and even with animals from other species. But they were also the descendants of hunters, of warriors, of survivors who had clawed their way to the top of a death world. When someone threatened the innocent, when someone hurt children, something old and dark woke up inside them. The pirates did not know it yet, but they had made a terrible mistake. On day 3, they found the pirate base. It was built into a massive asteroid, hidden in the densest part of the nebula. The pirates had chosen their location well. The gravitational fields and radiation in this area would hide any sensor signature. The swirling gases would make visual detection almost impossible. But humans had developed tracking techniques over millions of years. They knew how to follow prey that was trying to hide. They knew how to read the environment for signs that something was Wrong, Park had noticed the patterns. First, the debris from this grace had been drifting in a specific direction. Not randomly, but along a path like a trail of breadcrumbs leading to a destination. Then had spotted the energy readings. They were faint, almost invisible, against the background radiation of the nebula, but they were there, regular, artificial, the signature of a power plant and life support systems. The adamantine hung in the darkness, hidden behind a cloud of gas, and watched the pirate base. I'm reading multiple ship signatures, reported at least a dozen vessels docked at the station, all armed, all operational. Defense systems asked, plenty weapons. Platforms, shield generators, they've got this place locked down tight. Park looked at the tactical display and frowned. Captain, we're outnumbered, and even if we could get past their defenses, we'd be fighting a small army. I know, said, standard doctrine says we should withdraw and call for reinforcements. I know, but we're not going to do that. Are we? Looked at the station. Somewhere in there, thousands of were being held prisoner, families, children, elders. They had been in captivity for over 40 days now. Every hour that passed was another hour of suffering. No, she said, we're not. Those people have waited long enough. She turned to face her crew. I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be the hardest thing any of us have ever done. The odds are against us. We might not all make it back, but somewhere in that station, there are 3,000 people who need our help. They're counting on us, even if they don't know we're here. She paused. On Earth, our ancestors had a saying, leave no one behind. It meant that you never abandoned your people, no matter how dangerous the situation, no matter how bad the odds. You went back for them, or you died trying. Those aren't our people, someone said quietly. It wasn't a complaint, it was just an observation. They are now, replied. The moment that beacons started transmitting, the moment someone called for help, they became our responsibility. That's what it means to be human. We don't wait for someone else to save people, we do it ourselves. She looked around the bridge. So we're going in. We're going to hit them fast and hard, and we're not going to stop until every single prisoner is free. And when we're done, the galaxy is going to learn what happens when you mess with people under human protection. The crew was silent for a moment. Then Sergeant Major Obb's voice came over the intercom. Captain, the Marines are ready. Just give the word, spoke up from her station. The flight crews are standing by. We can have shuttles in the air in 3 minutes, added his voice. Engines are at 100%. Whatever you need, Captain, we can do it. Allowed herself a small smile. Then let's go save some people. The adamantine moved out of hiding and began its approach toward the pirate base. On the station, alarms started to sound as sensors detected the incoming ship. The pirates scrambled to their stations, confused and afraid. No one came into the shroud. No one had ever found their base. It was supposed to be impossible, but humans had never been very good at accepting impossible. The battle for this grace was about to begin. The adamantine held position, the shadow of a broken asteroid, close enough to see the pirate station, but far enough to avoid immediate detection. Captain had called for a tactical pause. Time to plan and prepare before they committed to an assault that could end in all of their deaths. In the main briefing room, the senior officers gathered around a holographic display showing the enemy base. The station was massive, built into an asteroid the size of a small moon. Whoever had constructed it had spent years digging tunnels and chambers into the rock. Defense platforms bristled from every surface. Docking bays held ships of various sizes, all armed, all ready for combat. "The Bone Cartel," said Lieutenant, reading from the intelligence files they had managed to decrypt from intercepted signals. "That's who we're dealing with. They're a coalition of pirates, slavers, and organ harvesters from at least a dozen different species. They've been operating in the outer regions for decades, but no one knew they had a base in the Shroud." "Makes sense," Commander Park said. "No law enforcement would ever come looking for them here. It's the perfect hiding spot." "What do we know about their forces?" asked. "Pulled up more data. Best estimate, we're looking at around 400 to 500 hostiles on the station. Mixed species, some deserters, a few others. They're not trained military, but they're experienced fighters. They've been doing this for a long time." "Weapons?" "Standard pirate fare, energy rifles, plasma pistols, some heavier weapons for ship defense. Nothing too advanced, but enough to be dangerous." Sergeant Major Obi studied the display with the careful eyes of a soldier who had spent her entire adult life in combat. She was a large woman, tall and broad-shouldered, with skin so dark it seemed to absorb light. Her voice was deep and calm, the kind of voice that made people listen. "The numbers are bad," she said. "We've got 47 people total. 23 of those are combat-trained Marines. Rest are crew. Even if we count the crew as fighters, we're still outnumbered 10 to 1, closer to 20 to 1 if we're honest," Park added. "I've faced worse odds," Obi said. She wasn't bragging. She was stating a fact, but not by much. "We're going to need a plan that takes away their numerical advantage." Nodded. "That's why we're not going to fight them head-on. We're going to do what humans have always done when we're outnumbered. We're going to be smart. We're going to be fast, and we're going to hit them where they don't expect it." She tapped the display, highlighting a section of the station far from the main docking bays. "This is the station's command center. If we can take it, we control everything: life support, communications, the defense grid. We take this room and we effectively cut the head off the snake." "How do we get there?" asked. "The main corridors are going to be crawling with guards. We don't use the main corridors." Zoomed in on a different part of the station, a network of smaller tunnels appeared running through the asteroid like veins through a body. Maintenance shafts, waste disposal systems, ventilation ducts. The station was built into a natural asteroid, which means there are gaps and passages all through the rock. Most of them are too small for the larger species. Some of them are flooded with toxic runoff from the processing plants. A few are exposed to vacuum. Park stared at the display. "You want us to crawl through maintenance tunnels, swim through poison, and walk through airless passages just to avoid using the front door?" "Yes, that's insane." "It's human," allowed a small smile. "Our ancestors crawled through worse places than this. They swam in waters filled with predators. They held their breath to dive for food. They squeezed through caves so tight they had to exhale just to fit through. We evolved to go places other creatures couldn't. That's our advantage." Obi was already nodding. "Small teams, fast movement, hit the command center before they even know we're inside." "Exactly. while the assault team moves through the tunnels. The adamantine will create a distraction, will engage their defense platforms, make a lot of noise, keep their attention focused outward. By the time they realize we're already inside, it'll be too late. The officers looked at each other. It was a risky plan. A lot of things could go wrong. But it was also exactly the kind of plan that had allowed humans to survive on a death world for millions of years, not through strength alone, but through cleverness, through endurance, through the willingness to do things that other species would never even consider. Who leads the assault team? Asked. I do. Obi said before could answer. This is a marine operation. My people, my responsibility. Agreed, said. Pick your team, Sergeant Major. 20 should be enough. Lighter and faster is better. Already got my list. The briefing continued for another hour. They went over every detail, every contingency, every possible thing that could go wrong. By the end, everyone knew their role. Everyone knew what was expected of them. As the officers filed out, called Obi back. Sergeant Major, a moment. Obi turned and waited. The two women had served together for years. They understood each other without needing many words. You know, this might be a one-way trip, said quietly. I know some of your people won't be coming back. I know that too. Studied her old friend's face. There was no fear there, no hesitation, just the calm acceptance of a soldier who had made peace with death long ago. Then why? Asked. Why volunteer for this? You could have stayed on the ship, let someone else lead the team. Obi was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. When I was a girl in Logos, my grandmother told me a story. And GT snorts. And GT. She said that before our people came to the stars, before we even knew the stars were places you could go, we had a word. Ubuntu. It means something like I am. Because we are. A person is only a person through other people. She looked at the holographic display where the outline of the pirate station still glowed faintly. Those in there, they're not my species. They're not my family, but they're people, someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's grandmother, and right now they're suffering because no one else in this galaxy was willing to help them. She turned back to, I am because we are. If I turn my back on them, what kind of person does that make me? What kind of person does that make us? Nodded slowly. I feel the same way. No, you do, Captain. That's why. Follow you. There was nothing more to say. Obi saluted and walked out, leaving alone with her thoughts. Down in the ship's armory, the Marines were preparing for combat. The room was filled with the sounds of weapons being checked, armor being fitted, equipment being tested. 20 soldiers moved through the space with practiced efficiency, each one following rituals they had performed hundreds of times before. Corporal Diana sat on a bench cleaning her rifle. The weapon was older than most of the equipment on the ship, a model that had been in service since before humanity first left Earth, but it was reliable. It had never jammed, never failed, had carried it through 6 combat deployments, and it had brought her home every time. Beside her, Private Jackson was sharpening his combat knife. The blade was unnecessary in an age of energy weapons and plasma rifles, but every human Marine carried one. It was tradition. It was also practical. Snort's knives didn't run out of power. They didn't make noise, and in close quarters, when everything else failed, cold steel still worked. You scared?" Jackson asked without looking up from his work, a little admitted, "Only idiots aren't scared before a fight. Fear keeps you alive. But I'm also angry. You saw that toy, some kid stuffed animal floating out there in the cold, some kid held. That thing, snorts, some kid lost it. Because a bunch of pirates decided their lives didn't matter," she finished, cleaning her rifle and began reassembling it. Her hands moved automatically, guided by muscle memory. "I keep thinking about my nephew. He's 5 years old, has this little stuffed dog. He takes everywhere, calls it Captain. Barks." Jackson smiled slightly. "Captain Barks, he's 5, names aren't his strong suit." Clicked the rifle back together and checked the sights. "But if something ever happened to him, if someone ever took him, I would burn down the entire galaxy to get him back. I wouldn't stop, I wouldn't rest, I would find whoever did it, and I would make them pay." She looked at Jackson with hard eyes. "Those kids in there, they've got parents too, parents who are probably going crazy right now, not knowing if their children are alive or dead. So no, I'm not just scared, I'm angry, and that anger is going to carry me through whatever happens next." Jackson nodded. He understood. They all understood. Across the room, Sergeant Major Obi was conducting final inspections. She moved from soldier to soldier, checking equipment, offering words of encouragement or advice. This was the part of leadership they didn't teach in officer training, the human part, the part where you looked your people in the eyes and reminded them why they were fighting. "Private Tour," she said to a young man barely out of training. "You ready?" Tour swallowed hard. He was the youngest member of the team, only 19 years old. This would be his first real combat action. "I think so, Sergeant Major." "That's not a yes." "Yes, Sergeant Major, I'm ready." Obi studied his face. She could see the fear they're hiding behind the bravado. She had seen the same look on dozens of young soldiers over the years. Some of them had made it, some of them hadn't. She couldn't predict which category Tour would fall into. "Being scared is normal," she said, keeping her voice low so the others wouldn't hear. "Everyone's scared before their first fight. The trick is to use it. Let it sharpen your senses. Let it make you faster, more alert. Fear is just energy. You can waste it by panicking, or you can channel it into action." "How do I do that?" "Focus on the mission. Focus on the person next to you. Don't think about dying. Don't think about what might happen. Just think about what you need to do in the next 10 seconds, then the next 10 after that. Break it down into small pieces and handle them one at a time." Tours nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "And one more thing," Obi added. "If it all goes wrong, if everything falls apart, you stick with your team. Humans have survived for millions of years because we don't abandon each other. That's our secret weapon, not our guns, not our ships. Each other. You remember that and you'll be fine." "Yes, Sergeant Major, thank you." Obi moved on to the next soldier, leaving Tor to finish his preparations. In another part of the ship, a different kind of preparation was taking place. Doctor had transformed the cargo bay into a temporary field hospital. Medical supplies lined the walls. Portable beds had been set up in neat rows. Everything was ready to receive casualties. Because there would be casualties. Everyone knew that it was the mathematics of combat. Even the best soldiers with the best equipment took Losses, the only question was how many. Moved through the space, checking supplies for the 10th time. It was unnecessary, she had already checked everything twice, but the ritual calmed her, gave her something to do with her hands while her mind raced. Her assistant Foster approached with a tablet in hand. Doctor, I've finished inventorying the surgical supplies. We have enough for maybe 50 major operations. If casualties go higher than that, then we improvise, said. Humans have been performing surgery since before we discovered metal. Our ancestors operated on each other with stone tools and thread made from plant fibers. If our supplies run out, we'll adapt. How can you be so calm about this? Looked at him. Foster was a good medic, skilled and dedicated, but he was also young, trained in the clean and orderly hospitals of the inner colonies. He had never worked in the chaos of a real battlefield. I'm not calm, she admitted. Inside I'm terrified, but terror doesn't help my patience. Competence does. Preparation does. So I prepare, and when the wounded start coming in, I'll be ready to do my job. She put a hand on his shoulder. You will be too. I've seen you work. You're good at this. Just remember your training and trust yourself. Foster took a deep breath and nodded. There's one more thing, added. When the casualties come in, some of them won't make it. No matter how hard we work, no matter how skilled we are, some of them will die on our tables. When that happens, you can't stop, you can't freeze, you mourn later. During the battle, you move on to the next patient and you save whoever you can. How do you do that? How do you just move on? You don't. Not really. Every patient I've ever lost stays with me. I remember their faces, I remember their names, but I also remember everyone I've saved, and the only way to keep saving people is to keep working, even when it hurts. The ship's intercom crackled. All hands, this is the captain. We begin our approach in 1 hour. All assault team members report to the airlock for final staging. May whatever gods you believe in watch over us all. The message ended. Around the ship, 47 humans finished their preparations and said their private prayers. In the armory, the Marines performed one final ritual. They gathered in a circle, arms around each other's shoulders, heads bowed. Sergeant Major Obi spoke. We are about to enter battle against an enemy that outnumbers us, an enemy that has killed before and will try to kill again. Some of us may not come back, but we go anyway because there are people who need us, people who are counting on us, people who have no one else. She looked around the circle, meeting each soldier's eyes. We are human. We are the children of a death world. Our ancestors survived ice ages and plagues and predators and each other. They looked at a hostile universe and said, we will not be broken. We will not give up. We will endure. Her voice grew stronger. Today we carry that legacy into battle. Today we show the galaxy what it means to be human. Not our technology, not our weapons, our heart, our courage, our refusal to abandon those who need us. She squeezed the shoulders of the soldiers on either side of her. Whatever happens out there, I am proud to serve with every single one of you. Now let's go save those people. The circle broke. The Marines filed out toward the airlock. Their faces were calm. Their eyes were determined. On the bridge, Captain watched the pirate station on the inn. Less than an hour, her people would be inside those walls, fighting, dying, killing. Commander Park approached and stood beside her, having second Thoughts, he asked. No, I'm thinking about what comes after if we succeed. We'll have 3,000 traumatized refugees. Our hands, people who have been through hell, they'll need medical care, psychological support, a safe place to recover. The conquered will provide. That will they? They've already written these people off once. What happens when we show up with survivors they'd rather forget about? Park considered this. Then we make them remember. We bring those people out of the shroud. We put them in front of the assembly, and we make the whole galaxy look at what happened. Make them see the faces, hear the stories. The conquered can ignore a statistic. They can't ignore living, breathing people. Nodded slowly. That's assuming we survive. Captain, I've served with you for 8 years. I've seen you pull off things that should have been impossible. If anyone can do this, it's you. It's us. Thank you, James. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we're back on the other side. He returned to his station, continued to stare at the in 1 hour. Everything would begin. In 1 hour the fate of 3,000 people would be decided. She hoped they were ready. She hoped she was ready. There was only one way to find out. The hour passed quickly, as hours before battle always do. The assault team assembled at the airlock. 20 Marines in full combat gear. Their faces were painted with dark colors, breaking up their features, making them harder to see in low light. It was an old tradition going back to when their ancestors had hunted in forests and jungles. Camouflage, concealment, the tools of a predator. Corporal stood at the front of the line, rifle ready. Beside her, Private Jackson checked his knife one last time. Behind them, Private Tour tried to control his breathing. Sergeant Major Obi's voice came over their headsets. Final check, sound off. One by one the Marines confirmed they were ready. Good. Remember the plan. Fast and quiet until we hit the command center. Once we're there, all hell breaks loose. Watch your corners, watch your teammates. No one gets left behind. The airlock began to cycle. It's time, Obi said. Let's go be heroes. The outer door opened, revealing the dark tunnel they would use to infiltrate the station. It looked like a throat leading into the belly of some great beast. The Marines moved forward and were swallowed by the darkness. The battle for this grace had begun. The maintenance tunnel was barely wide enough for a human to crawl through on hands and knees. The walls were slick with something that might have been water or might have been something worse. The air was thick with the smell of chemicals and decay. Corporal Diana loved it. Not the smell, not the cramped space, but the feeling, the focused awareness that came from being in a dangerous place, doing a dangerous thing. Every sense was heightened. Every nerve was alive. This was what she was born for. She crawled forward, rifles across her back, moving as quietly as possible. Behind her, 19 other Marines followed in a single file line. They communicated with hand signals only. Quick gestures passed from one person to the next. The tunnel sloped upward, taking them deeper into the asteroid where the pirate station was built. According to the maps they had studied, they were currently passing beneath the main docking bay. Above them, hundreds of pirates went about their business, completely unaware that death was crawling through their walls. Checked her wrist display. They had been moving for 40 minutes. The command center was still another 30 minutes away. Her knees were scraped raw from the rough floor. Her shoulders ached from the constant awkward movement, or would have given Up long ago, but humans were built for this. Their ancestors had crawled through caves and burrows, squeezing through tight spaces to hunt for food or escape from predators. The discomfort was nothing. The discomfort could be ignored. She reached a junction where the tunnel split in two directions. Holding up a closed fist, she signaled for the team to stop. Then she consulted her map and pointed to the right. Team resumed movement behind her. Private Tour was struggling. He was trying not to show it, but could see the fear in his eyes every time she looked back. His movements were jerky, nervous. His breathing was too fast. She caught his attention and gave him a quick nod, a small gesture of reassurance. "You're doing fine, keep going." Tors nodded back. His breathing slowed slightly. They continued through the darkness. 20 minutes later, the tunnel opened into a larger space. It was some kind of waste processing chamber filled with tanks and pipes and machinery that hummed with constant activity. The smell here was almost unbearable. Pulled a small filter mask from her belt and pressed it over her nose and mouth. The others did the same. Sergeant Major Obi moved up from the middle of the line. She surveyed the chamber with experienced eyes. "This wasn't on the map," she said quietly. "They must have expanded the station since those plans were made." Replied. "Can we get around it?" Studied the chamber. There were catwalks running along the walls leading to various access points. Most were unguarded. The pirates clearly thought no one would ever be in this area. "Over there," she pointed. "That hatch looks like it leads into the main ventilation system. We can use that to get to the command center. It's exposed. If anyone looks down here, then we move fast." Obi considered for a moment, then nodded. "Go." Moved out onto the catwalk, staying low, using the railing for cover. One by one, the Marines followed. They crossed the chamber in silence, nothing but shadows. In the dim light, they were halfway across when a door opened on the far side of the room. Everyone froze. Pirate walked onto the catwalk on the opposite side of the chamber, where large beings almost 3 m tall with thick skin and multiple arms. This one was carrying a toolkit. It looked like a maintenance worker, probably here to check on the waste processing equipment. The stopped. It had noticed something, maybe a sound, maybe a flicker of movement. It turned its head, scanning the chamber. Didn't breathe. None of them did. For a long moment, nothing happened. The stared into the shadows where the Marines were hiding. Its small eyes narrowed. Then Private Jackson moved. He was across the catwalk before anyone could stop him. Knife in hand, he dropped from the railing, landing silently on the platform below, the turned mouth opening to shout an alarm. It never got the chance. Jackson's blade found its throat. The knife was ceramic, sharper than steel, designed for exactly this kind of work. It cut through this tough skin like paper. The alien made a wet, gurgling sound and collapsed. Jackson caught the body before it could fall and make noise. He lowered it gently to the ground, then looked up at Obi with questioning eyes. Obi gave him a single nod. "Good work." They kept moving. Ventilation shaft was just where had predicted. They climbed through the hatch one at a time, pulling themselves up into a horizontal duct that was only slightly more comfortable than the maintenance tunnel. At least the air here was cleaner. The ventilation system was designed to keep the station's atmosphere breathable. Cool, fresh air flowed past them as they crawled. 10 More minutes brought them to their destination, reached a grated opening and stopped. Through the gaps in the metal she could see the command center below. It was a large circular room filled with control consoles and holographic displays. Dozen pirates sat at various stations, monitoring the station systems. At the center of the room stood a figure that made blood run cold. It was another, but this one was different. It was enormous, nearly 4 m tall, its body wrapped in expensive clothing and decorated with jewelry made from what looked like bone. Its face was cruel, the face of someone who had caused pain for pleasure and never felt a moment of regret. This had to be the leader, the boss, the one in charge of the entire operation. Signaled back to Obi using quick hand gestures to describe what she saw. Obi moved forward to look for herself, then nodded. They waited outside the station. The adamantine had begun its distraction. Captain stood on the bridge, watching as her ship engaged the pirate defense platforms. Weapons fire lit up the darkness of the nebula. Shields flickered and strained. The ship shook with every impact. Forward batteries target the nearest platform, she ordered. Take it out. Lieutenant fired. A lance of energy shot from the adamantine and struck the defensive position. The platform exploded in a ball of fire. One down. Reported 11 to go. Keep firing. Make as much noise as possible. The pirates were responding now. Their ships were powering up, preparing to launch. Communication channels were flooded with confused chatter. Everyone was focused on the threat outside. No one was looking inside. In the command center, the attack began. Pushed out the grate and dropped through the opening. Rifle already firing. Snorts. Her first 3 shots took out the pirates closest to the door, preventing them from calling for backup. Jackson was right behind her. Then tosses. Then the rest of the team. The room exploded into chaos. Pirates scrambled for weapons. Alarms started screaming. Giant leader roared with fury and reached for a massive gun mounted on its hip. Obi was faster. She had entered through a different vent, dropping directly behind the leader. Before they could draw its weapon, she was on its back, blade pressed against its throat. Nobody move, she shouted. The room went still. 12 pirates stood frozen, caught between reaching for their guns and surrendering. The leader had gone rigid, feeling the edge of the blade against its skin. Tell your people to stand down, Obi said, her voice cold and calm. Now the laugh, it was an ugly sound. You think you've won? You think this changes anything? There are 500 of my soldiers on this station. You have maybe 20. The moment you leave this room, you're dead. Maybe, Obi agreed, but you'll die first, and I'm betting your people aren't too organized without someone giving them orders. She pressed the blade harder. A thin line of purple blood appeared on his throat. Last chance, tell them to stand down. She's not bluffing, said across the room. Her rifle was steady, aimed at the nearest group of pirates. I've seen her take heads off. She's good at it. The eyes flickered between Obi and it was calculating, trying to figure a way out. It didn't find one. Fine, it growled. Everyone stand down. Put your weapons on the floor. One by one, the pirates. Good, Obi said. Now where are they? Prisoners. What prisoners? Obi's blade drew more blood. The 3,000 people you kidnapped from this. Grace, where are they? This face twisted into something like a smile. Ah, the livestock. Most of them are in the holding pens on level 7, the healthy ones anyway. Some have already been sold, others were. It paused, savoring the words processed. Something changed in Obi's eyes. The calm focus shifted into something darker, something ancient. Processed. Their organs are quite valuable on the black market, and their skin makes lovely decorations. Would you like to see? I have some samples in my private quarters. For a moment, Obi's grip tightened on the knife. For a moment, everyone in the room thought she was going to kill the right there. Then she took a breath and loosened her hold. She said into her communicator, "We've taken the command center. The prisoners are on level 7. Send the second team." Copy. That's Sergeant Major. Team 2 is on the move. Obi looked at them with cold eyes. "You're going to help us free those people, and then you're going to face justice. The Galactic Concord has laws about slavery and murder. I imagine they'll have some questions for you." The Concord laughed again. The Concord doesn't care about anyone. They abandoned those refugees. They declared them dead. Why do you think I chose targets? Because I knew no one would come looking. You were wrong. Was I? You're humans, a species that's been in space for less than 2 decades. You have no alliances, no power, no political influence. The Concord will ignore this. They always ignore things that make them uncomfortable. Obi smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. That's the thing about humans. We don't need the Concord permission to do what's right. We don't need political influence or alliances. We just need people who need help and will come for them every single time through nebula that kill everything, through stations filled with enemies, through whatever stands in our way. She leaned close to this ear. You should have done your research. We're not like the other species. We don't give up. We don't back down, and we never ever forget. On level 7, the second team was encountering resistance. The holding pens were guarded by several dozen pirates who had not received the stand-on order. They had fortified their position, using the corridors as choke points, laying down heavy fire on anyone who tried to approach. Lieutenant led this team. She wasn't a Marine, but she was a damn good fighter. She had grown up in the asteroid mining colonies where accidents were common and survival skills were essential. Suppressing fire, she shouted, "Keep their heads down." Her team opened up with everything they had. Energy bolts and plasma rounds filled the corridor, forcing the pirates to take cover while the firefight raged. Private Tour moved. He had found a side passage, maintenance access that the pirates hadn't thought to guard. It was small and narrow, barely enough room to squeeze through, perfect for a human. Tour crawled through the darkness, trying to ignore the sounds of combat. Behind him, his heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His hands were shaking. Focus on the next 10 seconds, he reminded himself. Then the next 10 after that, the passage opened into a storage room behind the enemy position. Tor emerged silently, pressing himself against the wall. Through the doorway, he could see the backs of the pirates. They were completely focused on the threat in front of them. They had no idea death was behind them. Tor's raised his rifle, took a breath, and opened fire. The first pirate went down before it knew what was happening. The second turned and died mid-turn. The third managed to get off a shot that went wide before Tor ended it. Chaos erupted among the enemy. They spun around, trying to face this new threat. and in doing so exposed their backs to steam. The crossfire was devastating. 30 seconds later it was over. The corridor was filled with bodies, stepped forward, checking each fallen pirate to make sure they were down for good. When she reached Torres, she paused. Nice work. Private Torres was shaking, his hands, his shoulders, everything. The adrenaline was fatting, leaving him cold and weak. I killed them, he said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. I just killed them. Yes, you did. And because of that, we can save the people. On the other side of those doors, she put a hand on his shoulder. It gets easier, not the killing. That should never be easy, but carrying it, you learn to carry the weight. Torres nodded. Slowly, for now, said, focus on why you did it. Snorts. Those pirates chose their path. They kidnapped families, sold children, murdered innocents. You stopped them. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be proud of. She moved toward the doors. Now, come on, we've got people to save. Holding pens were a horror show. 3,000 had been crammed into spaces meant for a few hundred. They had been given barely enough food and water to survive. Medical care was non-existent. The smell of sickness and death hung in the air. When the doors opened and humans walked through, the prisoners cowered. They had learned to fear anyone who came through those doors. Then lowered her weapon and held up her hands. It's okay, she said, speaking slowly and clearly. We're here to help. We're from the TAN Recovery Corps. We've come to take you home. Silence, confusion. They didn't understand. No one had come to save them. The conquered had declared them dead. They had given up hope. An elderly pushed her way to the front of the crowd. Her bioluminescent skin was dim, almost gray. She had clearly been among the prisoners for the full 42 days. You are humans? She asked in broken standard. Yes, ma'am. The death world species, the dangerous ones, smiled gently. That's what they call us, but we're not dangerous to you. We're dangerous to the people who hurt you. The elderly's eyes filled with tears, or whatever passed for tears among her people. Her dim glow began to brighten. You came, she whispered. You actually came? Of course we did. Someone asked for help. The word spread through the holding pens. Humans. The humans came. They fought through the shroud. They attacked the station. They're setting us free. They began to glow brighter, not just the elders but the adults, the children. The light of hope spread from person to person until the entire pen was illuminated. Tor stood in the doorway watching. His hands had stopped shaking. This is why, he thought. This is why we do it. This is why we came. In the command center, Obi received the report. All prisoners accounted for, said over the communicator. 2,847 survivors. Some need medical attention, but most are ambulatory. We can start moving them to the ships. What about the rest? The manifest said 3,000. A pause. The pirates processed about 150. For organs, we found remains. Obi closed her eyes. 150 people, men, women, children, butchered for profit. Understood, she said. Begin evacuation procedures. Get those people out of here. She looked at the who was now bound and lying on the floor. The creature was watching her with dark amusement. 150, it said. That's all. I thought the number was higher. Obi walked over and crouched beside it. You think this is funny? I think it's inevitable. The galaxy is cruel. The snort's strong. Take from the weak. Your species should know this. You did the same thing too. Each other for centuries before you. Learned to pretend to be civilized. You're right, we did. We had wars and slavery and genocide and every other horror you can imagine. We know exactly what evil looks like because we invented most of it. She leaned closer, but we also learned something else. We learned that the only way to fight evil is to stand against it, not with speeches, not with laws, with action, with people willing to put themselves between the predators and the prey. She stood up. That's what we're doing today. That's what we'll keep doing every time someone calls for help, because that's who we are. Now that's who we choose to be. She walked away, leaving thee on the floor. Sergeant Major said, "The station is secure. Adamantine reports all enemy ships have been disabled or destroyed. We won." Obi looked around the command center, at the bound prisoners, at the blood on the floor, at her soldiers, tired and wounded, but still standing. "Yeah," she said quietly, "I guess we did," but there was no celebration in her voice, no triumph, just the grim satisfaction of a job done well. Outside, the Adamantine floated in the darkness, surrounded by the wreckage of pirate ships. Captain watched from the bridge as shuttles began fing survivors from the station. They had done it. They had done the impossible. Now came the hard part, getting everyone home. She turned to Commander Park, said, "A course back through the shroud, best possible speed." I captained the engines. Hummed to life. The ship began to move. Behind them, the pirate station grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the swirling nebula. They were not done yet. The journey home would be dangerous. The survivors would need care. The conquered would have questions, but for now, in this moment, they had won. They had emerged from the shadows, and they had brought 3,000 people back from the dead. The journey back through the shroud took 6 days. 6 days of fighting against gravitational waves that wanted to tear them apart. 6 days of radiation alarms and engine failures and moments everyone on board thought they were going to die. 6 days of pushing through darkness that had swallowed every other ship that had ever entered it. But this time was different. This time the Adamantine was not alone. 2 pirate ships had been captured during the assault on the station. Their crews had surrendered rather than fight to the death, and now those vessels flew alongside the Terran warship. Their holds were filled with survivors, packed in tight but safe. 3 ships instead of 1, 3 times the capacity, 3 times the chance that everyone would make it home. Captain stood on the bridge of the Adamantine and watched the swirling colors of the nebula flow past. She had barely slept in 6 days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the they had rescued, the children who had clung to her soldiers, too afraid to let go, the elders who had wept with joy, the parents who had searched desperately for family members who might or might not still be alive. 2,847 survivors, 3 dead. The numbers ran through her mind over and over. They had saved so many, but not everyone, never everyone. Commander Park approached with a cup of coffee. It was terrible coffee brewed from emergency rations that had been sitting in storage for months, but it was hot and it was caffeinated, and that was all that mattered. "You should rest," he said, handing her the cup. "Doctor says you're running on fumes." "I'll rest when we're out of the shroud. That could be another day. Maybe 2, then I'll rest in a day. Maybe 2. Park knew better than 2. argue he had served with long enough to understand that some battles couldn't be won. Instead, he took a position beside her and stared at the survivors are holding up. He said, better than expected. They are resilient. They've had to be. There was destroyed by the same war that scattered them across the galaxy. They've spent years moving from place to place, looking for somewhere to belong. This was supposed to be their last journey, a new colony, a fresh start. It still can be. We're going to get them there. Took a sip of her terrible coffee. I know, I just wish we could have gotten there faster, maybe saved a few more. You can't think like that, Captain. We did the impossible. We went where no one else would go. We fought an enemy no one else would fight. We brought back nearly 3,000 people that the entire galaxy had written off as dead. That's not a failure. That's a miracle. It doesn't feel like a miracle. It never does, not to the people who make it happen. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the nebula swirl and dance around them. Captain, Lieutenant called from her station. I'm picking up something on long-range sensors. We're approaching the edge of the shroud. Straightened up. How long until we're clear? At current speed, approximately 4 hours. Push the engines a little harder. I want to be out of here in 3. Captain, the next 3 hours were the longest of life. Every minute felt like an eternity. Every warning alarm made her heart jump, but the ships held together. The survivors stayed safe, and slowly, gradually, the swirling colors of the shroud began to thin, and then finally they emerged into clear space. The filled with stars, clean, bright, normal stars, not filtered through layers of radiation and gas. The sensors stopped screaming. The engines settled into a steady hum. The nightmare was over. We're out, Park announced. All 3 ships clear of the shroud. A cheer went up from the bridge crew. Aloud herself, a small smile. The first one in days. Send a message to the conquered station, she said. Tell them we're coming home. Tell them we've got survivors. Tell them to have medical teams ready. Already on it, Captain. The message went out across the vast distances of space, and across those distances, the galaxy began to wake up to what had happened at the conquered station. Ambassador N was in her quarters when the news arrived. She had not slept well in 48 days. Every night she dreamed of her people dying in the darkness. Every morning she woke up to a reality where no one was coming to save them. When her communicator buzzed with an urgent message, she assumed it was another diplomatic matter, another treaty to negotiate, another problem to solve. The endless work of an ambassador who represented a scattered and dying people. Then she read the message. For a long moment she couldn't process what she was seeing. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. Survivors. The adamantine coming home. She read it again and again and again. Then she began to glow, not dimly the way she had glowed for the past 48 days, brightly, brilliantly. Her bioluminescence blazed with an intensity she hadn't felt since before the war that had destroyed her. Joy, pure, overwhelming joy. She ran from her quarters, still glowing like a small sun. She ran through the corridors of the station, past startled diplomats and confused bureaucrats. She ran until she reached the main observation deck, where she could see the darkness of space stretching out toward the distant shroud. They were coming. Her people were coming home. She fell to her knees and wept. The adamantine and its escort Ships arrived at Concord Station the next day. By then word had spread throughout the galaxy. The humans had done the impossible. They had entered the shroud and returned. They had fought an army of pirates and won. They had saved thousands of people that everyone else had given up on. The docking bay was crowded with beings from 100 different species. They had come to see for themselves, to witness the survivors emerge from the ships that had carried them through hell. Ambassador N stood at the front of the crowd, surrounded by medical teams and counselors and officials from the government. Her glow had not dimmed since she received the news. If anything, it had grown stronger. The airlock opened. For a moment nothing happened. The crowd held its breath. Then the first survivor stepped out. It was an elderly woman, the same one who had spoken to Lieutenant in the holding pens. She was thin and weak, her skin still pale from the ordeal she had endured, but she was walking on her own 2 feet. She was alive. Behind her came more dozens, hundreds, families clinging to each other, parents carrying children, brothers and sisters holding hands. They streamed out of the ships in an endless river of light, their bioluminescence growing brighter with each step. Crowd parted to let them through, rushed forward to embrace their lost relatives. Cries of joy and sorrow mixed together as people found each other and wept and held on tight and watched it all, tears streaming down her face. Then she saw Captain, the human woman, emerged from the adamantine, followed by her crew. They looked exhausted. Their uniforms were torn and stained. Some of them were visibly wounded, bandages wrapped around arms and legs and heads, but they walked with their heads held high and pushed through the crowd until she reached them. Captain, she said, her voice was thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. I don't have words. What you did, we did what anyone would do. Said, we heard a call for help, and we answered. No, not anyone, no one else in the entire galaxy would do what you did. They all said it was impossible. They all said my people were dead. Only you believed. Was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. We didn't believe because we're special, Ambassador. We believed because we've been in their position. Throughout our history, humans have faced moments when we thought all was lost. Wars, disasters, plagues. Times when it seemed like no one was coming to save us. And you know what we learned? What? That sometimes the only ones who can save us are ourselves. That hope isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. It's something you fight for, even when everyone else has given up. She looked at the stream of survivors still flowing from the ships. Those people never stopped hopping, even in the darkness, even in the hands of their captors. They kept that beacon transmitting. They kept calling for help, and as long as someone is calling, someone should answer. In Tu's hand, it was a gesture of deep respect among her people, reserved for those who had earned eternal gratitude. The people will never forget what you did, she said. Never. For as long as we exist, we will tell the story of the humans who came out of nowhere, who flew into death itself to save strangers who asked for nothing in return. We did ask for one thing, reminded her, full medical support and refugee assistance. You will have it, whatever you need. Whatever it takes. She squeezed hand. Thank you, Captain. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. The Galactic Concord Assembly met 3 days later. The chamber was more crowded than it had been in centuries. Every species wanted to see what would happen. Every representative wanted to hear the testimony. Ambassador N requested the floor first. She stood in the center of the great hall. And GT snorts. And GT, her glow brighter than it had ever been. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the chamber. For cycles we have looked upon the humans. With suspicion, she said, we called their world a death world. We called them primitive. We called them dangerous. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. We were right, they are dangerous, dangerous to slavers, dangerous to tyrants, dangerous to anyone who preys upon the innocent. Their world did forge them in fire, and that fire made them into something the galaxy desperately needs. She turned to face the human delegation where Captain sat with her crew. Their uniforms had been cleaned and pressed, but the exhaustion still showed in their faces. They had come directly from debriefing sessions that had lasted for hours. We thought the SOS was lost in. Continued, we thought those people were gone forever, and then they emerged from the shadows and proved us wrong. She bowed the deep formal bow that her people reserved for those who had earned eternal honor. The people will never forget, and perhaps it is time the conquered remembered what it means to have courage. A murmur ran through the assembly. Representatives whispered to each other, processing what they had heard. The ambassador rose from its seat. The actions of the humans are remarkable, it admitted. We did not believe it was possible. We were wrong. It turned toward the human delegation. Captain, the collective formally apologizes for dismissing your offer of help. We should have trusted you. Nodded. Apology accepted. The representative was next. The mathematics we used to calculate the odds of survival were flawed. It said we did not account for human factors. This is a gap in our understanding that must be corrected. One by one, the other species added their voices, apologies, acknowledgments, questions about how the humans had done what they did. Through it all remained quiet, letting her crew bask in the attention they deserved. Sergeant Major Obi, Lieutenant Commander Park, Doctor, Corporal, Private Tour. All of them, they had earned this moment. Finally, the representative drifted forward. The ancient beings' gaseous form shifted and swirled as it spoke. We have watched the younger species for thousands of years, it said. We have seen them rise and fall. We have seen civilizations bloom and wither. In all that time, we have never seen anything quite like what we witnessed here. It turned to face the assembly. The humans are not like us. They do not think as we think. They do not calculate odds as we do. When they see an impossible task, they do not turn away. They lean in. They embrace it. They treat death itself as nothing more than a challenge to be overcome. It paused. Some might call this madness. But perhaps what we call madness, they call courage. Perhaps what we call recklessness, they call determination. Perhaps the galaxy needs a species that is willing to do impossible things, simply because those things need to be done. The assembly fell silent. Continued, we have treated the humans as newcomers, as primitives, as dangerous animals to be watched and contained. This was a mistake. They have shown us something today that we had forgotten. That bravery still exists. That hope still matters. That sometimes the only answer to darkness is to light a fire and walk straight into it. It turned to the human delegation. Captain, on behalf of the collective, and I suspect on behalf of many others, in this assembly, I offer you our respect, not just for what you did, but for who you are. The galaxy is better for having you in it. Stood, thank you, she said, but I want to make something clear. We didn't do this for respect. We didn't do it for glory or recognition or political advantage. We did it because it was the right thing to do, because someone needed help and we were in a position to provide it. She looked around the assembly, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of species. Humans have a long and complicated history. We've done terrible things to each other. Wars, slavery, genocide. We know what evil looks like because we've created plenty of it ourselves, but we've also spent centuries trying to become better, trying to build something that our ancestors would be proud of, trying to live up to ideals that always seemed just out of reach. She straightened her spine. When we left Earth and came to the stars, we made a promise to ourselves. We said that out here in the great darkness between the stars, we would be the light that we always wanted to be. We would be the help that we wished someone had given us. We would be the hope that we had to create for ourselves. Her voice grew stronger. So no, we didn't save those for your respect. We saved them because that's who we choose to be. And we'll keep saving people, wherever they are, whoever they are, as long as there's a human heart beating in the galaxy, because that's the promise we made, not to you, to ourselves. The assembly was silent. Then slowly the representatives began to applaud. It started with their bioluminescence blazing with gratitude, then the joined in, their gaseous forms rippling with approval, the species after species adding their voices to the chorus. It was the first time in centuries that the galactic conquered had applauded anyone. Sat back down. Park leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Not bad for a bunch of primitive death. We're just getting started," replied. Outside the assembly hall, Corporal found Private Tour standing by window, staring out at the stars. "Hey," she said, coming to stand beside him. "You okay?" Tours was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about the ones we couldn't save, the 153. Yeah, me too. Do you think they knew at the end? Do you think they knew someone was coming?" Considered the question carefully. "I hope so," she said finally. "I hope that somehow, somewhere they knew. They weren't forgotten. That's the best we can offer. Not that we'll always win. Not that we'll always arrive in time. But that we'll always try. That we'll never give up. That as long as someone calls for help, someone will answer." Tours nodded slowly. "Is it always like this after a mission?" "Like what?" "Like heavy, like you're carrying something you can't put down." Reached into her pocket and pulled out the stuffed toy she had found floating in the nebula. She had kept it through the entire mission. She wasn't sure why. "This belonged to a kid," she said. "I don't know if that kid survived or not. I don't know if I'll ever find out, but I carry it to remind myself why we do what we do. The weight isn't just burden towards, it's also purpose. It's the thing that keeps us human." She put the toy back in her pocket. "We carry the weight so that others don't have to. That's the job, that's the privilege." Tours was silent for a long moment. Then he straightened his spine and nodded. "I think I understand," he said. "Good, now come on. The captain is buying drinks for the crew, something about celebrating the impossible." They walked away from the window together, leaving the stars behind. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy changed. The Bone Cartel was dismantled. Its leaders were put on trial before a special tribunal of the galactic. Conquered, the boss whose name turned out to be the Collector was sentenced to life imprisonment in a facility designed to hold the worst criminals in the galaxy. The survivors were given a new colony world far from the dangers of the Outer Rim. It was a beautiful planet with purple skies and green oceans and forests that glowed with bioluminescence. They named it New Hope in honor of the humans who had given them a second chance. The shroud remained as deadly as ever, but now ships carried better charts. Navigation data compiled by Commander Park was shared with the Conquered, showing the safe paths through the chaos. It wasn't enough to make the nebula safe, but it was enough to give future explorers a fighting chance. And the humans, they went back to work. There were always people who needed help, always calls for assistance that no one else would answer, always impossible missions waiting for someone brave enough or crazy enough to attempt them. The Tan Recovery Corps grew. New ships, new crews, new soldiers willing to walk into the darkness. Captain received a promotion. She turned it down. She said she was happier on the bridge of the adamantine where she could do the work that mattered. Sergeant Major Obi trained a new generation of Marines. She taught them everything she knew about survival, about combat, about carrying the weight. Doctor wrote a paper on treating radiation exposure that was adopted across the galaxy. She never stopped working in the field. Corporal eventually found out that the child who owned the stuffed toy had survived. His name was, he was 7 years old, sent him a new toy along with a letter explaining where she had found the old one. Wrote back asking if she was a superhero. She wrote back saying no, she was just human. Said that was even better. Private Tour stayed with the Corps. He carried the weight just like had taught him. He saved lives. He lost lives. He kept going anyway. And somewhere in a quiet corner of the galaxy, a new beacon began to transmit another call for help, another impossible situation, another group of people waiting for someone to answer. The adamantine changed course without hesitation. Its engines hummed, its crew prepared for whatever came next, because that was the promise, that was the purpose, that was what it meant to be human. They heard the call and they answered always, forever, until the last star went